I'd really hoped to stay out of this Elon Musk attacking Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips debacle, but there was something within Keir Starmer's speech today which was really supposed to be focused on the NHS. Now, through no fault of Keir Starmer's, it was directed back to Elon Musk questions and so on, which I'll come to in just a second. So it was directed back to those comments by Elon Musk against Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips. And one of Keir Starmer's responses, I think, is plain wrong. As in, it's the wrong approach. Now, I'm going to caveat the rest of this video in just a moment because I don't want this to come across as attacking Keir Starmer for very good reasons, and I'll tell you that in just a moment. But first of all, if you are new to me and you would like a balanced approach from a Barrister of England and Wales, I am Daniel Shen-Smith. Please do subscribe to the channel. I am not the mainstream media. I am not taking sides here. I promise you that. I will try to give you both sides of the equation to look at things, but I will call out things when they're inconsistent or they're going back on things, or if I think things are just plain wrong. And so with that, I'm going to caveat the rest of this video here. I am going to play you the clip that I'm going to call out and say that I think is wrong by Keir Starmer here, with all respect to him. But before I do that, the big caveat. Now, I'm going to come back to responses to that as well by other politicians. But first of all, Keir Starmer did, in his response, talk about his previous work as Director of Public Prosecutions and all of the things that he did, which quite conveniently may be forgotten. So now this is set out by Keir Starmer. You can listen to his response and his interview in full, but these are all available for you to go and see yourselves. This goes back to March 2013. This was sort of toward the end of Keir Starmer's time as head of the CPS. But as you can see here, Keir Starmer had made various changes here in March as the head of the CPS. He said that he was unhappy with the way the police and prosecutors were bringing these types of cases. He said there's going to be new guidelines and hundreds of cases that have failed to result in prosecutions would be re-examined. And so I understand that then led to a record number of those types of cases being prosecuted because the guidelines changed, and under Keir Starmer's watch, all of these cases would be reopened. So there's a great amount of work that he's done there that should not go uncredited and is too easy to forget for anyone criticising him right now. But also this from yesterday with the BBC, where Streeting said that Elon Musk's attack on Jess Phillips was, he says, a disgraceful smear. And many people may agree with that. Now, again, many people may agree with that because Jess Phillips, now, she, just as Keir Starmer said, she doesn't need his argument on her behalf. She doesn't need mine either. But I will set it out here because I think that there are a lot of people criticising the decision not to open this review. If you don't know what that is, jump onto X and you'll find out all about it, because I'm not going to talk about that at great length in this video. But for those of you that don't know what that is, jump over there and you'll find out what it is. But it's a decision not to set up an inquiry over grooming over many, many years. And so for the attack on Jess Phillips' decision not to do that, many people may well agree with. But at the same time, to say that she has not stood up for women and girls over many years, in my view, would be wrong and would be unfair, would be an unfair criticism. The reason this page is on screen here, by the way, is because there is a record of everything said in Parliament and a record of speakers' contributions. And now this, you can see there are 19 pages worth of it, goes all the way back to 2015. You can see the contributions, you can see what was discussed. Take, for example, random page 15. You can look at sexual harassment and violence in schools or in Parliament, modern slavery, etc. You can open up these and see the contributions here. So you can see that these are just a snippet of those things said in Parliament, but obviously this is not the definitive word on everything that she's done, but there is a long history there of what she's done for that. So I thought this is still part of the caveat. I thought this caveat was necessary, that if anyone is going to criticise somebody, they really ought to look at everything they've done over many, many years. And I'm sure neither Keir Starmer nor Jess Phillips need me to speak on their behalf, but if I'm going to criticise, I'm going to do that with that caveat. So there's a long history there of work that they've done, so caveat out of the way. So however, now coming back to the point that I do want to criticise, which is in this video here. Now, when I say criticise, I think I understand why Keir Starmer makes this comment, but I think that it's misjudged, it's misguided. It's not to say that it's flat out wrong in that there is some truth in that he speaks of the far right. Now, the far right exists, and the far right is open to criticism. But the way that it's labelled here, I think, is quite misjudged. I think it's going to lead a lot of people to a conclusion that they need not be led to, because in my view, I think it is potentially mislabelling people that are involved. So without all the confusion, listen to this clip and then I'll tell you why I think that.
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth, and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
So I'm going to pause it there. So again, that was in response to the question of Elon Musk and criticisms of not calling for this inquiry and so on. Now, when he said that, and he said quite specifically, he said politicians, and I mean politicians, the bit that I object to is where he says jumping on the bandwagon of the far right by calling for these reviews, by calling for these inquiries. I don't think that's quite right, because on the one hand, there may well be far-right views, and those, just to be clear what we mean by far-right, we are talking extreme right-wing views, typically referred to as right-wing extremism or, authoritarianism, ultra-nationalism. When you look at the meaning of this far-right, we are right across there with fascism, Nazism, and so on. So when he speaks of far-right, I don't think that is a correct way of addressing it. Because when he's talking and criticising people for calling for this inquiry, calling for this review, and saying that they are jumping on the bandwagon of the far right by calling for these inquiries, I don't think that's right. I think actually a lot of people that are calling for this inquiry is because, without going into all of the detail, because it would seem from the reading that I've done, and one of the reasons I haven't done this video yet is because I don't fully understand it. I haven't read the whole thing, and so I'm not going to go through the full thing. If I don't understand it fully and I haven't read it fully, that wouldn't be fair. But from what I do understand, there's a lot of people criticising that original inquiry that took 7 years, concluded in 2022, that it was narrow in focus, it was narrow in duration, it missed key areas. There's a lot of things that it didn't really cover, and therefore a subsequent inquiry is really required. That, at the moment, my understanding is deeper than that, but that's as much as I'm prepared to explain it right now. Those are the reasons that people are calling for the inquiry. Now, to label people that are calling for that inquiry as jumping on the bandwagon of the far right for that, there may be some people that are doing that because they do hold far right views and they are jumping on that bandwagon and so on. But I think to broadly label everybody, particularly as he specified, politicians for doing that, we may even be in the territory of defaming politicians here, because even for the Prime Minister making public statements about other officials here, it may even be something that they could object to. So if we jump to halfway through, I think it was, let's listen to that again.
Politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth, and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right.
So as I said, my criticism with that is a broad labelling and specifically targeting and labelling MPs as jumping on the bandwagon of, quote, the far right. I don't think that is correct to say that. I don't think it's the right, I don't think it's the right thing to say. But, and there's been response to that. Suella Braverman is one. She says, I've sat with some of the survivors in Rotherham and Rochdale. I've heard firsthand their harrowing stories. I often think about how terrified they must have been when they were being abused. The failure to stop the industrial scale of all of this is one of the nation's biggest scandals, and it continues today. And then her criticism, which I agree with. But again, there's a second caveat, which we'll come to in a minute. But her criticism here, where she says, for the Prime Minister to label anyone concerned with this scandal as far right is a grotesque insult to survivors and to millions of decent people across the country. They aren't jumping on a bandwagon here, she says. They are rightly furious with the injustice. And that's my view on that. I think that there will be some people on, quote, the far right, but equally we've got people on the far left making ridiculous statements as well. So we've got a whole mixture here. But to label, as Suella Braverman put it here, to label anyone concerned with this scandal as far right is a grotesque insult to the survivors and everybody else, because obviously there are a lot of people who have been affected directly or indirectly by this, and they are too calling for an inquiry, or they are supporting the people that are calling for an inquiry ostensibly on their behalf. And so to label them as far right, absolutely, I think that is an insult. So I think that is somewhat misguided and somewhat misjudged, with great respect. I do understand why he says it, because I think there is an argument there. There is a valid argument that some people will be on that side of the political spectrum, on that far side of the political spectrum, who will jump on things like this, who will have an obvious cause to jump on this, as he put it, jump on a bandwagon to garner some publicity and so on. But I think to do it in that way, I think was a bit misguided. But at the same time, when you have Conservative MPs who are now putting pressure on Labour to do this inquiry and that they should do more, etc. Again, the criticisms by Keir Starmer are somewhat valid in that we still have, and referred to by West Streeting, that we do have lots of recommendations that are yet to be implemented, that need to be implemented. I read through some of the recommendations, and the government response, the previous government response at the time, was essentially, well, yes, we hear you about that, but we're not going to do that, but we'd like more, feel free to give us more information, was some of the response that I read. But Rupert Lowe coined it very well here as well, and says, in response to Kemi Badenoch, who said, "It's good that you're saying this now, but many will ask, why didn't the Conservative Party act when it had the power to do so? Because it did." And this was in response to Kemi Badenoch saying the time is long overdue for a full national inquiry into these gangs and the scandal. Trials have taken place all over the country in recent years, but no one in authority has joined the dots. 2025 must be the year. So, over recent years, so it's not directly targeted solely or exclusively on Labour and Keir Starmer, etc., because she says in recent years these trials have taken place and the time is long overdue. But as Rupert Lowe says here in response, it's good that you're saying this now, but many will ask, why didn't the Conservative Party act when it had the power to do so? And for many, many years, it could have and didn't. So in that sense, yes, there have been many years that many changes could have been made and haven't. So let me know what you think about that. I hope you understand the caveats that I put into place here, because it would be unwise and unfair to levy such criticism without some of those caveats, because if you're going to criticize somebody, really do it with the knowledge of what they've done in the past. You can't discount that. As Keir Starmer said, he does enjoy the cut and thrust of politics and arguments and things like that. But at the same time, there are situations where lines are crossed. But I think if we are going to look at where those lines have been crossed, it is important to ensure that where the lines are, first of all, and that those lines have in fact been crossed and who's crossed them. And so that's why I try to give you caveats on this channel. Sometimes I outright attack a policy because I think it's indefensible. That does stray into my personal views, which I usually reserve for Black Belt Secrets, my other channel, linked in the description below. This video here is still not really my opinions. This video here is giving you both sides to look at this. It is saying, right, well, these allegations, these criticisms have been made, but you can look at the person's history and everything that they've done. And so the criticism against their history of work doesn't really stack up. But at the same time, when they make a criticism like that, such as this one, and labelling the far right, I think that was, quite frankly, and with all respect, I think that was a mistake that was made earlier last year. I keep reminding myself we've just ticked over a new year. But the criticisms made then of people posting online, yes, there would have been comments from people on the far right, but I think the vast majority of people were making criticisms and statements out of anger and frustration that they see what's going on and they don't like what's going on. And that is not necessarily, and in most cases isn't, far right. And even if it is a view that sits in the right wing of politics, I think it's wrong to label it as far right, just as it would be wrong to label someone far left just because they are left of centre. I hope that makes sense. This has been a video that I wasn't going to do, but I wanted to do this because it is blowing up. That's not the reason I want to do it. The reason I want to do it is because it's blowing up. Lots of people are having this debate and this argument, and I think a lot of people will miss and lose sight of a lot of facts here and a lot of the information. I think there will be a lot of statements and a lot of comments made, a lot of criticisms made without reference to the history and the body of work that people should be commended for in years gone by. I hope that makes sense. Let me know in the comments your thoughts, your questions, etc. Please do subscribe to the channel. As I said, I am independent, as some people often seem to think. I am not a Crown employee or anything like that. If we do work on behalf of the Crown, it is work on behalf of the Crown. We are independent. Barristers are always independent. As a bit of a trivia, even if you're an employed barrister, you are still independent because you have to act with independence under our rules of conduct. So I hope you found that interesting. Please do like the video and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.